I have seen dozens of articles about implementation of authorization for backend and frontend, and usually the flow is the following. You're creating your fancy client application using React, Flutter, whatever you want. You have your login page where you get email and password from user and send this email and password to the server, which basically authenticates you by checking whether user exists and returns the JWT token. Today I will explain why you should stop doing this implementation and change to something better. Let's go. I think before proceeding we should classify somehow the current approach, and to classify it I would use the most common approaches for authorization nowadays, which are two main protocols, Auth 2 and OpenID Connect, which is built on top of it. So in Auth 2 documentation you might find 4 different approaches for authentication and authorization. 3 of them are used for authorization of resource owner, which is a regular user. They called authorization code, implicit, and password credentials grants. Now let's forget about other 2 and let's focus on the password credentials flow. So if you go to RFC of Auth protocol and read about this grant, you might conclude that this is exactly this flow, like the client exchanging login and password, and in exchange it receives JWT token that it uses later on for the requests. Since it's Auth 2 protocol, it has additional parameters like scope and grant type. On top of that, there can be client authentication alongside with the user authentication, but let's forget about these details. We're gonna name the current flow password credentials flow. I found 5 main reasons why this flow is bad. The first one is user's credentials exposure. As stated in the official RFC itself, when the client has access to user's credential, it can leak them as well. So now security of your application and authorization depends on not only authorization server, but also on the client application. This is exactly what Auth 2 should prevent from. So you can onboard new third-party applications for authorization like this. You could use authorization code, for example, and your authentication will be performed completely on the authorization server side, and client will not have any access for users' credentials, which is good from security standpoint. The password credentials grant exists only for migration purposes to start onboarding to Auth flow, and it is not recommended to be used. Second point is password brute force. In our case, your client is completely different origin, domain, and front-end server than backend, right? And your login page is hosted on the client side. It means that you are sending login and password to your backend through the XHR request, which means now your backend should think about protection against brute force, create some throttling rules, rate limiting, etc. In classical authorization server, when the server hosts the page itself, it is sent through the form instead of XHR request, which has already kinda protection in itself using anti-forgery tokens, for example. Third reason, you cannot easily add external identity providers like authorization via Google, GitHub, Facebook, whatever else. I've been in such situation 2 times already when there was MVP stage and product says, okay, let's implement some email password and forget about this. We're on the MVP stage, let's move on. And then in couple of months, they are asking you, okay, we need Google authorization, implement it. And this is when real fun starts. The only way of doing it is to do it on the server side, because you want to deal only with your own JWT tokens, not with the tokens of identity provider, let's say Google tokens. And now you're exactly gonna implement Auth protocol authorization code, because Google cannot allow you password credentials flow. But in this case, your server will be acting as a client and Google authorization server will be acting like a Google authorization server. But also you would need to add a lot of hacks and workarounds to make it work, because Auth flow in a nutshell is kind of async communication. So you need somehow to find a way how to redirect your user in the end to your client origin, not to your server's origin. And this is how I did it once. It's quite possible I did it and rolled out to production, but it looks more like really workaround with a lot of security vulnerabilities and just, to exist and be functional, but it's not a good way and it's not the way you should do it in the real production. The fourth point is single sign-on. It is not possible when you are doing it like that. In case you need to onboard new client to your server, you would need to implement registration, login page. If the requirements are different, now you have this problem of handling it on your backend because 2 clients has different needs, right? And all these things. If you would have typical Auth server, it's not a problem. You just issue new client ID and client secret, put your redirect URI, and you're done. It's like matter of couple of hours. Fifth reason, which is not the legit reason to be honest, is you cannot implement multi-factor authentication. Or to be more precise, you actually can do it, but now you would need to handle everything on your own. You kind of reinventing wheel. Also, there is problem that your client and authorization servers are on different origins and you should somehow connect both of them, and it is bad. On top of that, most of the identity providers, which are external ones, for example, Microsoft Entra, they do not support multi-factor authentication at all if you're using password credentials. So this thing is also kind of not working. But don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that for every single situation and case, you should now go and implement your own OpenID Connect or OAuth protocol, right? It depends on the case. In case you need to just deliver something very fast, it's MVP and you're gonna rewrite it anyway, do it the usual way because it will be faster. But if you know now that you're gonna have external providers, that you're gonna have different clients like mobile and web, desktop, whatever, I would say you shouldn't even start with this custom password credential stuff and just straight away spin your own authorization server or just connect to existing OAuth providers that there are a bunch of on the internet now. Okay, it was me, Andrii. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe on my social media and share your experience. How do you implement authorization on your projects? See you. Bye.